The smell of another woman's Chanel No. 5 was still clinging to his collar when Mark turned the key in the lock. It was 6:14 a.m. He expected the usual routine, the smell of brewing coffee, the sound of the morning news, and his wife, Eleanor, waiting in the kitchen with that naive, trusting smile he had grown to despise. He had his lie ready, a late client dinner, a dead battery, a crash on the office couch. He walked in, ready to perform his usual act. But the house wasn't just quiet. It was hollow. There was no coffee. There was no news. And on the marble island where his breakfast usually sat, there was only a single, thick manila envelope with a red legal stamp. Mark didn't know it yet, but his life had ended 5 hours ago. The rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite at the St. Regis. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of expensive room service and the lingering musk of intimacy. Mark Sterling sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, fastening his cufflinks. They were gold, engraved with his initials, MS, a gift from his wife, Elena, for their 10th anniversary last month. He didn't look at them as he snapped them into place. His attention was entirely on the reflection in the mirror across the room, and the woman still tangled in the sheets behind him. "You're leaving already?" Jessica murmured, her voice thick with sleep. She stretched like a cat, deliberate and provocative. She was 24, ambitious, and possessed a kind of fiery energy that made Mark feel like the master of the universe. She was everything Eleanor wasn't, loud, demanding, and exciting. "I have to," Mark said, grabbing his blazer. "Eleanor thinks I'm in Chicago for the chaotic merger with the monumental Davis account. My flight lands in 2 hours. If I'm not home by 7:30 to shower and change, the timeline falls apart." Jessica laughed, a low, throaty sound. "You and your timelines. You act like she's the FBI. She's just Elena. What's she going to do? Bake you a pie and ask if you had a nice flight?" Mark smirked, checking his Rolex. "That's exactly what she'll do. That's the beauty of it, Jess. Elena is safe. She's the anchor. You don't worry about the anchor. You just let it drag along the bottom while you steer the ship." He believed it. For the last 2 years, Mark Sterling, the CFO of Sterling Vance Architecture, had lived a double life that he considered a masterpiece of logistical planning. He had the perfect suburban mansion in the wealthy enclave of Greenwich, Connecticut. He had the perfect, quiet wife who managed his home, hosted his dinner parties, and never asked questions about the unexplained withdrawals or the late nights. And he had Jessica, the marketing intern turned executive assistant, who gave him the adrenaline rush he craved. Mark felt invincible. He had convinced himself that he deserved this. He worked 80-hour weeks. He brought in millions for the firm. Why shouldn't he have a little extra on the side? Elena had her garden club, her charity auctions, and her books. She was happy in her small domestic bubble. He was protecting her, really. Ignorance was bliss. "When are you going to tell her?" Jessica asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her. The playfulness was gone from her voice, replaced by that nagging insistence that had been creeping in lately. Mark sighed, smoothing his tie. "We talked about this. Not yet. The fiscal year ends next month. A divorce right now would spook the investors. I need the optics of the happy family man until the board secures my bonus." "It's always next month, Mark," Jessica snapped. "It will happen," he lied. He had no intention of leaving Eleanor. Divorce was messy. Divorce was expensive. And frankly, he liked having his laundry done and his house kept immaculate. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. And for a man like Mark Sterling, what he wanted, he usually got. He leaned down and kissed Jessica on the forehead. I'll buy you those diamond studs you wanted for the gala. Deal?" Jessica pouted, but nodded. She was easily placated by shiny things, another trait Mark found convenient. He walked out of the hotel room, the heavy door clicking shut behind him with a finality he didn't register. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, he checked his phone. No messages from Eleanor. That was slightly odd. Usually, if he was traveling, she sent a text around 5 a.m. "Safe flight, honey. Love you." Today the screen was blank. She probably overslept, he thought, dismissing the twinge of unease. Elena was clockwork. If she wasn't texting, it just meant she was busy making his favorite homecoming breakfast, Eggs Benedict with that hollandaise sauce she made from scratch. He stepped out into the cold grey morning, the valet bringing around his black Porsche Panamera. The city was waking up, oblivious to the sins of the night. Mark tipped the valet $100, feeling generous. He slid into the leather seat, the engine purring to life. As he merged onto the highway heading toward Connecticut, he practiced his lies. The turbulence was awful over Ohio. The client was a nightmare, but I think we closed the deal. God, I missed you. He rehearsed the lines until they sounded like the truth. He was a good liar. He had been lying to himself for years, after all. He told himself he was a good provider. He told himself Elena was happy. He told himself that what she didn't know wouldn't hurt her. But as he crossed the state line, a strange feeling settled in his gut. It wasn't guilt. Mark had suppressed that emotion long ago. It was something primal. An instinct. The phone sat silent on the passenger seat. He dialed her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Elena. I can't come to the phone right now. Leave a message." Her voice sounded cheerful, light, the voice of the woman he thought he knew inside out. "Hey, babe," Mark said, keeping his tone breezy. "Just landed. Traffic is a beast, but I should be home in 40 minutes, dying for some coffee. See you soon." He hung up, frowning. Elena never let his calls go to voicemail. He turned on the radio to drown out the silence. He drove fast, weaving through the morning commuters, the Porsche eating up the miles. He wanted to get home, shower off the scent of Jessica, and slip back into the comfortable skin of the devoted husband. He turned onto Blackwood Lane, the manicured hedges and wrought-iron gates passing by in a blur. He approached number 42. The driveway was empty. Elena's white Range Rover was gone. Mark pulled in, the gravel crunching under his tires. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. It looked the same as it always did, imposing, brick, colonial. But the blinds were drawn. The porch light, usually left on for him when he travelled, was dark. A cold shiver went down his spine. She probably went to the store, he reasoned, out of eggs or milk. He grabbed his overnight bag from the trunk, packed with clothes he hadn't worn, just for the alibi, and walked to the front door. He inserted his key. The lock clicked. The door swung open, and the silence hit him like a physical blow. Mark stepped into the foyer, dropping his bag. "Elena," his voice echoed. It bounced off the high ceilings and the hardwood floors, returning to him unanswered. The house was cold. Not freezing, but the specific, sterile chill of a place that hasn't been lived in for hours. He walked into the kitchen. The counters were gleaming. There was no smell of bacon, no coffee pot gurgling. The sink was dry. "Elena?" he called again, louder this time, irritation creeping into his tone. "I'm home." He checked the garage. Empty. He pulled out his phone and tracked her location. They shared a location on their iPhones, a feature Elena had insisted on for safety years ago. He tapped her icon. Location not available. Mark stared at the screen. She had turned it off. or the phone was dead. Panic began to mix with his confusion. Was she hurt? An accident? Had she been called away for a family emergency? Her parents lived in Florida, but they were in good health. He walked back into the living room, and that was when he noticed the first detail that was truly wrong. The paintings. On the wall above the fireplace, there had hung a large original oil painting of the Italian coast, a piece Elena had inherited from her grandmother. It was gone. The wall was bare, save for the faint outline of where the frame had been. Mark spun around. The curio cabinet in the corner, usually filled with her collection of antique porcelain figurines, was empty. The glass doors were closed, but the shelves were stripped bare. He ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Elena!" He burst into the master bedroom. The bed was made, perfectly crisp, military style, but the closet door was wide open. Mark walked toward it slowly. His side of the walk-in closet was untouched. His suits, his shirts, his shoes, all exactly where he left them. He looked to the left, to Elena's side. It was decimated. The racks were bare. The shelves where her handbags usually sat were empty. The shoe rack was stripped. Even the velvet hangers were gone. It wasn't just that she had packed a bag. She had erased herself from the room. Mark stood there, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. This wasn't a trip. This wasn't an errand. She knew. The realization hit him, but his arrogance immediately fought back. How could she know? He had been careful. He used a burner phone for Jessica. He paid for hotels in cash or through a shell company account. Elena was not a detective. She was a simple woman who liked gardening and historical romance novels. She didn't have the capacity for this. He turned back to the bedroom, his mind racing. Where is she? I need to call the police. No, I can't call the police. What if she tells them? His eyes landed on the nightstand on her side of the bed. It was empty, except for 2 things. Her wedding ring. The 3-carat solitaire diamond he had bought her to shut her up after he missed her birthday 3 years ago. It sat there, cold and sparkling in the morning light, and next to it, a thick manila envelope. Mark walked over to the nightstand. His legs felt heavy, like he was wading through concrete. He picked up the ring first. It felt light, insignificant. He dropped it into his pocket. He reached for the envelope. It was heavy. On the front, in Eleanor's elegant, cursive handwriting, was a single word. Mark. He tore it open. He pulled out a stack of documents. The first page wasn't a handwritten letter. It wasn't a tear-stained note asking why or begging him to come back. It was a legal filing. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Elena Marie Sterling. Respondent, Mark Thomas Sterling. Mark laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. You have got to be kidding me. He flipped the page, and then the next. Attached to the divorce petition were photos. High-resolution, time-stamped, geotagged photos. Mark dropped onto the bed. There was a photo of him and Jessica at dinner 3 weeks ago. A photo of them entering the St. Regis last night. A photo of them kissing in the park near his office. The timestamps were precise. The angles were professional. These weren't taken by a jealous friend with an iPhone. These were taken by a private investigator. A very expensive one. How? Mark whispered. Where did she get the money for this? Elena had no income. He gave her a monthly allowance, generous, sure, but tracked. Every credit card purchase she made sent a notification to his phone. He controlled the finances. He controlled the accounts. He was the CFO. He knew where every penny went. He flipped further into the stack of papers, his hands shaking now. Beneath the photos was a letter. This one was on the letterhead of Reynolds, Stone and Associates. Mark froze. Reynolds, Stone and Associates wasn't just a law firm. It was the law firm in New York City for high-asset divorce cases. They were sharks. They cost $1,000 an hour just to answer the phone. Mark began to read the letter, signed by one Arthur Reynolds. Dear Mr. Sterling, please be advised that I represent your wife, Mrs. Elena Sterling, in the matter of your divorce. By the time you read this, Mrs. Sterling will have vacated the marital residence. Regarding the premises at 42 Blackwood Lane, as you are aware, the deed to this property is held in the name of the Sterling Family Trust. However, we would like to draw your attention to Clause 14, Section B of the prenuptial agreement you signed 11 years ago. Mark frowned. The prenup. He remembered it clearly. He had insisted on it. He was the rising star. She was the daughter of a library archivist. He wanted to protect his future assets. He had made her sign it without her even reading it, or so he thought. He read on. The infidelity clause, inserted at the request of the bride's father, states that in the event of proven adultery by the primary earner, all assets acquired during the marriage, including the marital home, shall revert immediately to the injured party. Furthermore, the vesting period for your shares in Sterling Vance Architecture, which are technically held in a joint spousal trust to avoid tax liability, has been triggered. Mark stopped reading. The room spun. The bride's father, Elena's father, was a nobody, a quiet man who smoked a pipe and read history books. He had died 5 years ago. Mark scrambled for his phone. He needed his lawyer. He needed to call his partner, David Vance. He dialed David's number. David, listen. Elena has gone crazy. She filed for divorce. She has some absurd lawyer. Mark. David's voice was icy. It wasn't the voice of his college buddy and business partner. It was the voice of a man speaking to a stranger. David. What's wrong? Mark, you need to check your email. The board just finished an emergency meeting. Meeting? What meeting? It's 7 a.m. Elena was there, Mark. She dialed in at 5:20 a.m. Or rather, her lawyer did. What does Elena have to do with the board? Mark screamed, standing up and pacing the room. She's a housewife. You really didn't know, did you? David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. You really never looked into her family history? She's a librarian's daughter. Her father was a librarian, yes, but her mother, Mark, her mother's maiden name was Van der Hoven. The name hit Mark like a freight train. The Van der Hovens, old money, railroad money, the kind of money that didn't flash logos but owned entire city blocks. She never told me, Mark stammered. She wanted to be loved for herself, Mark. She told us that when we started the firm. Why do you think we got that initial angel investment 10 years ago? The one that launched the company? Mark went pale. That was an anonymous investor from the Cayman Islands. That was Eleanor, David said. She owns 51% of the voting stock, Mark. She's the majority shareholder. She's been silent this whole time. But this morning, she wasn't silent. Mark fell to his knees. The phone slipped from his sweat-slicked fingers. She fired you, Mark, David said, his voice coming tinny from the floor. Effective immediately. Security is waiting for you at the office to clear out your desk. Don't come in. Mark stared at the wall where the painting used to be. He had cheated on his wife. He thought he was playing a game he couldn't lose. He thought she was weak. He thought she was stupid. But Eleanor hadn't just left him. She had erased him, and the manila envelope on the bed still had more pages. Mark sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, though only minutes had passed. The revelation that his quiet, bookish wife was the majority shareholder of his company. The silent hand that had fed him his success was a pill too bitter to swallow. But as his eyes drifted back to the manila envelope, he realized the horror wasn't over. There were more papers. He had stopped at the letter of termination, but the stack was thick. His hands, now trembling uncontrollably, turned the next page. It was a spreadsheet. A forensic accounting spreadsheet. At the top, it read, "Unauthorized expenditures and misappropriation of company funds, 2022-2024. Mark's throat went dry. He felt a phantom tightening around his neck, tighter than any tie he had ever worn. He had been careful, or so he thought. When he took Jessica to Cabo last spring, he had expensed it as a client development retreat. When he bought Jessica the Cartier bracelet, he had buried it under office supplies and vendor gifting. He was the CFO. He approved the audits. He moved the numbers. Who was going to catch him? The answer was staring him in the face. Eleanor. The spreadsheet was terrifyingly detailed. It didn't just list the amounts. It listed the locations, the dates, and the true nature of the expense, annotated in red ink. Item 142, St. Regis Hotel, Executive Suite. Date, Oct. 12. Amount, $40,200. Claimed, client meeting with Davis Corp. Actual, room service for 2. Champagne, spa treatment, female. Item 156, Saks Fifth Avenue. Date, Novitu. Amount, $8,500. Claimed, holiday gifts for key partners. Actual, designer handbag. Delivered to Jessica Miller's residence. Mark scanned the list. There were dozens of entries, thousands of dollars, and at the bottom of the document, a sum was circled in thick red marker, $342,000 or gazos. Beneath the number was a photocopy of a legal statute, 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 3943, wire fraud and embezzlement. "She's going to send me to jail," Mark whispered to the empty room. "She's not just divorcing me. She's going to prosecute me." He scrambled off the bed. He needed liquid cash. Right now. If they were coming for him, if the company lawyers were already drafting the criminal complaint, he needed to get out of the country. He needed a lawyer who wasn't afraid of the Van der Hovens. He fumbled for his wallet and pulled out his black Amex, the card that had no limit, the card that made him feel like a god in every restaurant in Manhattan. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number on the back of the card for the concierge service. He needed a flight to Zurich. He had a small account there, one he had set up years ago before he met Eleanor. It wasn't much, maybe 50 grand, but it was enough to start running. "Welcome to American Express Platinum Concierge," the smooth, automated voice said. "Please hold for a representative." Mark paced the room, sweating. "Pick up, pick up, pick up." "Mr. Sterling?" A human voice, polite but strained. "This is Sarah. How can I help you?" "Sarah, hi. I need a one-way ticket to Zurich. First class. Leaving JFK as soon as possible. Today. Right now." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence filled with the sound of keyboard clicking. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. "I am unable to process that transaction." "What do you mean, unable? It's a flight. Charge it." "Sir, your account has been flagged." "Flagged for what? Fraud? It's me. I'm authorizing it." "No, sir. It's not a fraud flag. The account has been suspended per a court order received this morning regarding the assets of the Sterling Marital Trust." Mark froze. "That's a credit card. It's my credit card." "It's a joint liability card linked to the primary assets, sir. We received a freeze order from the Southern District Court. All credit lines under your name have been suspended, pending the divorce litigation and the—" She hesitated. "The pending criminal investigation." Mark hung up. He didn't say goodbye. He just dropped the phone onto the plush carpet. They had frozen him out. He had no cash. He had $200 in his wallet. He ran to the wall safe behind the painting in the closet, the painting that was no longer there. He spun the dial. Left 42, right 10, left 33. The safe clicked open. Empty. Of course, Elena was the one who reminded him to change the batteries in the safe lock every year. She knew the combination. Inside the safe, where he usually kept a stack of emergency cash and his passport, there was only a post-it note. "It's with your lawyer. E." She had taken his passport. Mark let out a roar of frustration, kicking the heavy oak wardrobe. Pain shot up his foot, but the physical pain was a relief compared to the walls closing in on his mind. He was trapped, in his own house, in his own life. Wait. Jessica. Jessica didn't know yet. Jessica thought he was the powerful CFO, and Jessica had an apartment in the city, a small place, sure, but a place to hide, and he had bought her plenty of jewelry. If worse came to worst, they could pawn the diamond necklace he gave her last Christmas. That was worth at least 20 grand. He needed to get to Jessica. He needed to spin this. He would tell her. What? That it was a misunderstanding. That Elena was a psycho-vindictive ex? Yes, that would work. Jessica hated Elena. Jessica would take his side. He grabbed his bag. He had to leave before the police came. He ran down the stairs, ignoring the ghost quiet of the house, and sprinted to the driveway. He jumped into the Porsche. He pushed the start button. The engine sputtered and died. He pushed it again. Click, click, click. The dashboard lit up with a message. Remote immobilization, active. Contact dealer. No! Mark slammed his hands against the steering wheel. No, no, no! The car was leased through the company, through Sterling Vance Architecture. David Vance, or rather, Eleanor, had bricked his car remotely. Mark sat in the leather seat of the $150,000 car that was now nothing more than a paperweight. He looked out the windshield at the grey sky. He was stranded in suburbia. No car, no credit cards, no passport, and the police likely on their way. He looked at his phone. 1 bar of battery left. He dialed Jessica. Jessica picked up on the second ring. "Mark?" Her voice sounded annoyed. "I thought you were going home to play house with the wifey. Why are you calling me? It's risky." "Jess, listen to me," Mark said, trying to keep the panic out of his voice and failing miserably. "Something has happened. Elena, she knows. She knows." Jessica's tone shifted instantly. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity. "She found out about us? She knows everything. She filed for divorce. She kicked me out." "Wow," Jessica said. "So you're free. That's good, right? You said you wanted to leave her." "Yes, exactly. I'm free," Mark said, latching on to the narrative. "But listen, babe, it's messy. She's trying to freeze my accounts. She's being vindictive. I need a place to crash for a few days until my lawyers straighten this out. I'm coming to your place." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My place is really small, Mark," Jessica said slowly. "It's just for a night or two. Look, I'll make it up to you. Once the divorce settles, I'll have my half of the assets. We're talking millions, Jess. We can go to Paris. We can get that loft in Tribeca you wanted." "Your half of the assets," Jessica repeated. "I thought you said she had a prenup." "She does, but look, it's complicated. I just need you to call me an Uber. My car is having mechanical issues." "Mark," Jessica's voice was suddenly very sharp. "I'm looking at my company email right now." Mark's stomach dropped. "What? You're at work?" "Yeah, I get in early. Everyone is whispering. And we just got a company-wide memo from HR." "What does it say?" Mark whispered. "It says," Jessica read, her voice cold and detached, that Mark Sterling has been relieved of his duties as CFO effective immediately due to gross misconduct and financial irregularities. It says we are not to speak to you. It says security has a photo of you at the front desk. Jess, that's just corporate talk. They're trying to scare me. I built that company. It also says, she continued, ignoring him, that the company is conducting an internal audit of all expenses approved by you. Mark, did you put my apartment rent on the corporate card? Mark hesitated. I categorized it as a housing stipend for junior talent retention. You idiot, she screamed. They're going to come after me. They're going to make me pay it back. I don't have that kind of money. Jess, calm down. We'll fix it. I just need... You need what? You're broke, Mark. You're fired. You're probably going to jail. I have you. We love each other, remember? You said I was the only man who understood you. I loved the lifestyle, Mark, she snapped. I loved the dinners and the gifts, and the fact that you were going to make me a manager. I didn't sign up to visit you in prison. I didn't sign up to be poor. Jessica, please. I have nobody else. Don't come here, she said. If you come here, I'm calling the cops. I can't be seen with you. I have a career to think about. I'm deleting your number. Don't call me again. Click. Mark stared at the phone. The screen went black. The battery had died. He sat in the silent car, the silence of the suburbs pressing in on him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had traded a loyal wife for a mercenary, and the moment the money ran dry, the mercenary had done exactly what mercenaries do. She switched sides to save herself. He was alone, truly alone. But he couldn't stay here. He had to move. He got out of the Porsche and began walking. He walked down the long driveway of the home he had lost, dragging his overnight bag. The wheels rattled on the asphalt. He reached the end of the driveway and looked left, then right. He didn't even know where the train station was. He had always driven or taken a car service. He started walking toward the town centre, a 3-mile hike in Italian leather loafers that were pinching his toes. As he walked, a black SUV with tinted windows drove past him, heading toward his house. It didn't slow down. Mark turned to watch it. It turned into his driveway. A second SUV followed. Then a police cruiser. Mark's heart hammered. They were coming for the house. He ducked behind a large oak tree on the neighbor's lawn, watching from a distance. The vehicle stopped in front of his house. The doors opened. First, 2 uniformed officers stepped out. Then, a man in a sharp grey suit, Arthur Reynolds, the shark lawyer. And then, from the back of the first SUV, a woman stepped out. It was Eleanor. Mark gasped. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the floral cardigans or the sensible slacks she usually wore around him. She was wearing a tailored black power suit, heels that clicked on the pavement, and dark sunglasses. She looked taller. She looked like a CEO. She stood by the car, looking up at the house. She didn't look sad. She didn't look like a grieving wife. She looked like an architect inspecting a demolition site. Mark felt a surge of anger. That was his house. She was mocking him. He forgot about the police. He forgot about the restraining orders. He forgot about the prison time. He just wanted to scream at her. He wanted to hurt her the way she was hurting him. He dropped his bag and ran back up the driveway. "Elena!" he screamed. "Elena!" The police officers turned instantly, hands dropping to their holsters. Arthur Reynolds didn't flinch. He just adjusted his glasses. Elena turned slowly. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were dry. They were cold, hard flint. "Hold it right there!" one of the officers shouted, stepping between Mark and Elena. Mark stopped, panting, his chest heaving. He was 50 feet away from her. "You witch!" Mark screamed. "You planned this! You set me up!" Elena stared at him. She didn't shout back. She didn't cry. She just tilted her head slightly, as if observing a bug under a microscope. "I didn't set you up, Mark," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried across the distance effortlessly. "I just let you be yourself. You did the rest." "I made you!" Mark yelled, desperate to regain some power. "I managed the money. I took care of you. You were nothing but a librarian's daughter until I married you." Elena laughed. It was a genuine laugh, but it lacked any warmth. "Mark," she said, pity dripping from her voice. "My family built the library. My family built the bank you used to work for. I didn't need you to take care of me. I needed a partner. But you were too busy trying to be a big man to notice who you were actually married to." She turned to the lawyer. "Arthur, give him the bag." Arthur Reynolds reached into the car and pulled out a small, plastic grocery bag. He tossed it onto the driveway. It landed halfway between them. "What is that?" Mark sneered. "Your clothes," Elena said. "The ones you left at the dry cleaners last week, and your phone charger. I'm not heartless. I want my house, Elena. You can't just kick me out." "Actually," Arthur Reynolds spoke up, his voice smooth and oily, "we can. The deed transfer was recorded electronically at 9 a.m. You are currently trespassing on private property." "Trespassing?" Mark sputtered. "Officer," Arthur nodded to the policeman. The cop stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, you need to leave the premises immediately, or you will be arrested for criminal trespass and disturbing the peace." Mark looked at Elena. He looked for a shred of the woman who used to rub his back when he had a headache. He looked for the woman who made him soup. She was gone. Or maybe she had never really existed. Maybe that version of Eleanor was just a mirror she held up to reflect what he wanted to see. "Elena, please." Mark's voice broke. He realized the anger wasn't working. He tried begging. "I have nowhere to go. My cards don't work. Jessica kicked me out. I have nothing." Elena looked at him. For a second, her expression softened. Mark felt a spark of hope. "You have your freedom, Mark," she said softly. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? To be free of the boring wife? To live the high life?" She put her sunglasses back on. "Go live it." She turned around and walked into the house, her house, and closed the heavy oak door. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed like a gunshot. Mark stood there, the plastic bag of dry cleaning at his feet. "Move along, sir," the officer said, hand on his baton. Mark grabbed the plastic bag. He grabbed his overnight bag, and he turned around. He walked down the driveway, past the manicured hedges he used to prune, past the mailbox with his name still on it. He reached the street. The rain began to fall again. Cold, hard rain. He started walking. He didn't know where. He just knew he was walking away from the life he had destroyed. The rain was torrential now. It soaked through Mark's custom Italian suit, a $3,000 garment now ruined by mud and water. He had been walking for an hour. He found himself in the downtown area of Greenwich. He looked like a madman. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his shoes were squelching, and he was dragging a suitcase and a bag of dry cleaning. People on the street, people he might have once nodded to at the country club, stepped aside to avoid him, looking at him with a mixture of disgust and fear. They didn't recognize him. To them, he was just another vagrant. He stopped in front of a bank. Not his bank, a generic chain bank. He needed to think. He went into the vestibule to get out of the rain. He sat on the floor, leaning against the ATM machine. He was exhausted. He looked through the plastic bag Eleanor had given him. Inside, wrapped in the dry cleaning plastic, was his grey blazer. He checked the pockets. Nothing. Wait. The inside breast pocket. He felt a piece of paper. He pulled it out. It was a note, handwritten. Mark, I know you never read the prenup. And I know you never read the bylaws of the company. If you had, you would know that there is a golden parachute clause for executives, even if fired for cause. It's not much, but it's enough to keep you off the street. I deposited $5,000 into a prepaid debit card. It's in the pocket. Use it to get a lawyer. Or a therapist. I suggest the latter. Mark dug deeper into the pocket. There it was. A generic Visa gift card. $5,000. Yesterday, he had spent $5,000 on a bottle of wine at dinner. Today, it was his entire net worth. He stared at the card. He should rip it up. He should throw it in the trash out of pride. She was pitying him. She was tossing him crumbs, but his stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the night before, and he was cold. So cold. He clutched the card to his chest. He wasn't going to buy a therapist. He wasn't going to hire a lawyer. $5,000 wouldn't get him 10 minutes with a decent attorney. He needed a plan. He needed to strike back. Elena thought she had won. She thought she had neutered him. She thought he would just fade away into poverty and obscurity. She was wrong. Mark Sterling was a numbers man. He was a strategist. He had built that company just as much as she had funded it. He knew where the bodies were buried. He knew the tax loopholes they had used. If he was going down, he was going to take the whole ship down with him. He stood up, his resolve hardening. The despair was replaced by a cold, burning hatred. He walked out of the bank and into a cheap internet cafe across the street. He paid for an hour of computer time. He cracked his knuckles. He couldn't access the company servers. David had locked him out. But Mark had a memory like a steel trap. He knew the account numbers for the offshore holding companies. He knew the shell corporations in Panama that they used to minimize tax liability. He wasn't going to steal the money. He couldn't. But he could expose it. He opened a browser and searched for the contact information for the IRS whistleblower office. Then, he searched for the email address of the New York Times business desk. "You want a war, Elena?" Mark whispered, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Let's see how you like it when the world knows that the saintly Van der Hoeven heiress is running a tax evasion scheme." He began to type. The Motel 6 on the outskirts of Stamford smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. It was a far cry from the St. Regis, but it was all Mark could afford. He sat on the lumpy mattress, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his manic face. He had done it. He had spent the last 3 hours composing the most destructive email of his life. He had attached a detailed memorandum explaining how Sterling Vance Architecture used a series of shell companies in the British Virgin Islands to funnel profits and avoid U.S. corporate tax. He named the companies Apex Holdings, Blue Sky Ventures, Ironclad Trust. He knew the codes. He knew the routing numbers. He knew it all because he had designed the system. He hit send. The email went to the IRS whistleblower office and the investigative desk of the New York Times. Mark leaned back, a twisted smile on his face. "Checkmate, Elena." He cracked open a vending machine beer he had bought with the last of his cash. He imagined the scene tomorrow morning, FBI agents raiding the mansion, Elena being led out in handcuffs, the headline screaming, "Heiress involved in massive tax fraud." If he was going down for embezzlement, she was going down for tax evasion. And the beauty of it? As a whistleblower, he might get immunity. He might even get a percentage of the recovered taxes. He could walk away with millions and see her ruined. He slept soundly for the first time in 24 hours, fueled by the intoxicating liquor of revenge. The next morning, Mark woke up at 10 a.m. He grabbed his phone, which he had charged with the cord Elena had so graciously returned, and refreshed his email. There was a reply from the New York Times. His heart leapt. They were interested. They wanted an interview. He opened the email. "Dear Mr. Sterling, thank you for your tip regarding Sterling Vance architecture. However, we are declining to pursue this story. The financial structures you described, Apex Holdings, Blue Sky Ventures, are already a matter of public record. Sterling Vance Architecture held a press conference 3 days ago announcing a voluntary audit and restructuring of these specific entities. The company has already agreed to a settlement with the IRS regarding past irregularities, citing mismanagement by former executive leadership. Furthermore, we have received a cease and desist regarding your communication, as the documents you provided appear to be privileged company data stolen upon your termination. We will not be contacting you further." Mark stared at the screen. His blood ran cold. 3 days ago, Elena had been planning this for weeks. She knew about the offshore accounts. Of course she did. She was the majority shareholder. But she hadn't just known about them. She had proactively reported them. She had gone to the IRS before firing him. She had framed the narrative. "We found irregularities caused by our CFO. We are fixing them, and we are paying what we owe." By doing that, she stripped Mark of his whistleblower status. He wasn't revealing a secret crime. He was just confessing to his own handiwork after the fact. And the phrase, mismanagement by former executive leadership. He read the email again. He hadn't exposed her. He had just handed the authorities a signed confession that he was the one who knew the intimate details of the illegal scheme. He had just corroborated her story that he was the mastermind behind the tax avoidance. There was a knock on the motel door. Mark jumped. "Who is it?" "Room service," a voice called out. "I didn't order room service." "Mr. Sterling?" A different voice, deeper, authoritative. "This is Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest." Mark scrambled to the window. 2 black sedans were parked in the lot, blocking his view of the highway. He looked at the bathroom door. Could he hide? No. He looked at the computer. The evidence of his tip was right there on the screen. He walked to the door. His legs felt like jelly. He opened it. Agent Miller was a tall man with a face like carved granite. He held up a badge. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers. "Mark Thomas Sterling," the agent said. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government." I was the whistleblower," Mark stammered. "I sent the email." Agent Miller smirked. "We know. We got a copy. Thanks for the roadmap, Mark. It matches the documents Mrs. Sterling provided us perfectly, except yours has your digital signature on the creation dates." They spun him around. The handcuffs clicked. They were tight, cold. As they led him out to the car, Mark saw a figure standing across the street, watching from the safety of a coffee shop patio. It wasn't Elena. Elena wouldn't waste her time watching him get arrested. It was Jessica. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a latte. She watched him being shoved into the back of the cruiser. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. She looked like someone who had just dodged a bullet and was watching it hit someone else. As the car pulled away, Mark saw her pull out her phone and make a call. Probably to her new boss, or a lawyer, or a new boyfriend. Mark Sterling, the man who thought he controlled the world, sat in the back of the cage, heading toward a federal indictment, realizing that he had never really been the player. He had always been the pawn. 5 years later, the cafeteria at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury was loud, smelling of boiled cabbage and disinfectant. Mark sat at a corner table, nursing a tray of lukewarm meatloaf. He looked older. His hair, once perfectly styled and dark, was now thinning and grey. The arrogant set of his jaw was gone, replaced by a permanent sag of resignation. He wasn't the Wolf of Wall Street anymore. He was inmate 49201. He had taken a plea deal, 5 years for embezzlement and fraud. He had 6 months left. He kept his head down. He did his job in the prison library, stacking books, repairing spines. It was ironic, really. He had despised Elena's father for being a librarian, and now it was the only thing keeping him sane. A younger inmate, a kid named Leo, who was in for hacking, slid into the seat across from him. Leo had a contraband tablet, a small device smuggled in by a guard. "Hey, Mark," Leo whispered. "Check this out. Isn't this your ex?" Mark looked up, his eyes weary. He didn't want to look, but he couldn't help it. Leo tilted the screen. It was a YouTube video, a clip from Bloomberg Technology. The headline read, "Sterling Vance Architecture Unveils Revolutionary Green City Project in Singapore." On the screen, standing on a podium in front of a gleaming, futuristic model, was Eleanor. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a white suit that radiated power and grace. Her hair was cut in a sharp, chic bob. She looked 10 years younger than when he had last seen her. Standing next to her was a man. He was tall, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and a kind smile. He had his hand on the small of her back, protective, supportive, loving. "Who's the guy?" Leo asked. "That's David," Mark whispered. "My old partner." "Damn," Leo laughed. "She kept the company and took the partner? That's cold, man." The reporter on the screen asked Elena a question. "Mrs. Vance, sorry, you go by Ms. van der Hoven now. This project is projected to net over $1 billion in the first quarter. How did you turn the company around after the scandal 5 years ago?" Mark leaned in. He needed to hear this. He needed to hear her mention him. He needed to know he still mattered, even as a villain. Elena smiled at the camera, her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Honesty," she said simply. "We cut out the rot. We stopped focusing on short-term profits and started focusing on legacy. And I had a great team who believed in the vision when things were dark." She looked at David, and they shared a look of genuine, profound connection. "And," she added, turning back to the camera, "I learned that sometimes you have to let go of the things that are weighing you down to really fly." She didn't say his name. She didn't say, "my ex-husband." She didn't even acknowledge his existence. To her, he wasn't a villain. He wasn't a monster. He was just the rot. Something to be cut out and discarded, so the healthy tissue could grow. Leo pulled the tablet back. "Brutal. She didn't even drop your name." Mark stared at his meatloaf. That was the true punishment. It wasn't the prison cell. It wasn't the loss of the money. It was the irrelevance. He had spent his whole life desperate to be important. He cheated because he wanted to feel desired. He stole because he wanted to feel powerful. He lied because he wanted to create a reality where he was the king. And in the end, he was nothing. A footnote in her success story. A cautionary tale in a compliance seminar. "You okay, Mark?" Leo asked. Mark picked up his plastic fork. His hand didn't shake anymore. The anger was gone. The hope was gone. All that was left was the dull, grey reality of the bed he had made. "I'm fine, Leo," Mark said quietly. "I'm just finishing my lunch." The bell rang. Lunch was over. Mark stood up, scraped his tray into the trash, and got in line to be counted. 1, 2, 3. He was just a number. Outside the prison walls, the world kept turning. Elena was building cities. David was building a life with the woman he loved. Jessica was probably hustling some other guy in some other city, and Mark Sterling walked back to his cell, the heavy steel door slamming shut with a sound that was no longer terrifying, but simply final. The story of Mark Sterling is a brutal reminder that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it's just astroturf covering a sinkhole. Mark had it all: a loyal wife, a powerful career, and a beautiful home. But his arrogance blinded him to the true value of what he possessed. He mistook Elena's kindness for weakness and her silence for ignorance. He learned too late that the quietest people in the room are often the ones holding the keys. Elena didn't just survive his betrayal, she used it as fuel to ascend to her true potential, proving that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting, it's thriving without the person who held you back. Mark's downfall wasn't caused by bad luck. It was the inevitable compound interest of his own lies. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. What do you think? Did Mark deserve a harsher punishment, or was becoming irrelevant the ultimate justice? Let me know in the comments below.